Hello, welcome to the 50-Minute Hour. This is Corey. Today I'm joined by Calvin and our recurring guest, Jonathan. What are we drinking today?
I'm drinking water straight from the tap.
Nice. Jonathan, you have water over there?
I'm back again with the agua.
And I have whiskey in a pipe. Okay. So I'm the one in the hot seat today.
What is our topic today?
Well, I think Jonathan wanted to revisit some of what he said in the last episode and maybe explore new territories as well. Is that right, Jonathan?
That's correct. I thought it would be necessary because I listened to the podcast and I thought, I was too harsh on some things. I wasn't, I was too hyperbolic. And one of those things would be, there is 50% of it is like sentimentality or like working on yourself spiritually. There has to be actions, and the actions of what everyone misses. But there absolutely, positively is it's almost like there's an action. Then you contemplate that action, and then you put that contemplation into terms of the next action. But I thought I was too hard on that. That's definitely a part of it. I just think that that's a part that everyone knows. So I was kind of, you know what I mean? I was putting it down because everyone knows it's real. And no one understands the whole work thing. And I want that to be clear. And I also want to be clear that there is absolutely, positively 100% methods in almost every tradition of straight chastity, of reaching the same goal. And there's many different ways. There's ways that spill the seed, supposedly, that reach the same goal. That's what a lot of Evela practice. They sleep with prostitutes.
But it is spilling the seed in a very methodical way.
Very methodical way. And after years of saving it. I practice the method with one person, which is very tantric oriented. And tantra, and in the form I practice, they say that be careful who you practice this with because your souls will be bound for eternity.
Is that something you've experienced?
The eternity part?
Well, the souls being bound.
Yes.
Is that like an experiential, immediate sense of something?
Yes, 100%. And this is something Bruno talks about in the same passage where he talks about withholding your seed drives a woman crazy. He talks about how the man needs to be very careful with who they withhold the seed with. And if they withhold the seed of someone they don't want to be with, to not allow the woman's energy in them because it binds them.
And this is the same Bruno that Neil deGrasse Tyson deifies as the godfather of science, modern science, in the first episode to the new Cosmos series.
Yeah.
Which is kind of ironic.
As we were talking before this, Bruno is the, so you have Plato, who was distilled, let's say, Egyptian mysticism. And you have Plotinus, who takes Plato's ideas as far as he thinks is possible, right? And then they kind of die. Then you have the Renaissance, where you have the Borghese and the Ficino, the Pico, the Bruno. And they take Plotinus's ideas to an even further extension than he ever imagined. But one thing they always stick to is the Platonic hierarchy. Mm-hmm. Bruno would be aghast if he knew people like Tyson were even speaking his name. He was a guy who thought the king should have way more power than the church. He thought they should take the role of Egyptian pharaohs. He was very elitist, and if anything, he's the medieval Evela, if maybe worse.
Or we might even say the Edward Bernays of magic.
that was his goal.
The masses are just slaves.
Yeah, and Aristotle's quote about some people are born to be slaves, Bruno takes that to a far extent. But Bruno's whole thing is taking Platonism and controlling the masses and controlling how they think and controlling through the church and through, we'll get to this later, through astral manipulation, through Platonic memory houses, controlling everyone and having only the elect who can even understand this. And it's something that it maybe turns people off, but it's something that as I've gotten to read more and more of the stuff and understand it more, it makes a lot of sense. Because you talk to people about any of this and they're just like, what? No, man, did y'all see that new rapper's video? That they don't care. They have no interest in it.
Well, I have a friend who says a lot of rappers are actually rapping about exactly these sort of subjects. I don't know if that's true.
I don't think so. I don't know who that would be. Maybe they don't know what they're doing, or I don't know. I can't imagine. It's not about rappers. Like I can't.
Kanye's new. What's his new album?
Oh, it's about his mom, but all I know about it is he forgot to release it, and he had a massive listening party, and people just sat around a stadium, and he didn't show up for 2.5 hours.
I could see Kanye getting into this sort of stuff in a weird way.
Yes, Kanye for sure. But I would say the same thing about country music. anything like pop culture in general. Maybe if someone's telling them what to write or explain it to them, but I can't imagine any normal person understanding this.
In Seraphim Rose's notes to his lecture series, he has this really funny quote. I don't think he's trying to be funny, but I always found it hilarious. He's quoting a historian and musician who was very famous in his day, and he wrote this seminal work not too long before he died on like the entire history of music. It was a huge compendium, and it just sort of, he wrote this in like late 20th century, mid 20th century, and he just kind of stops at like 1850, and everyone, they thought the work was brilliant, like one of the masterpieces of music history. But everyone kept asking him like why he just kind of stopped at 1850. And he's like, his answer was, well, people have continued to produce things that are an assemblages of sounds, but I can't call it music. whatever happened after 1850, I don't know what it is, but it isn't music. and there's an interesting phenomenon in this respect where, in a certain sense, pretty much all music nowadays is pop music in the sense of where it comes from, which is top down, rather than an organic coming out of like a spiritual cast or folk people in the country, which is something that's being produced from like a more inner state of the soul, versus like a producer who hooks up with an artist, who hooks up with a lyricist, who makes this like Fordist factory assemblage of what is going to get mass appeal or whatever. There's an interesting aspect to which the entire way what we think of music is totally different in modernity in regards to its origin.
I think it's art in general.
Yeah, art in general. Yeah. I think with, and this is Plato too, but music has a particularly dangerous aspect because it's like poetry, which is already very dangerous. But the fact that it has this aspect of sound makes it even more powerful and goes even deeper into the unconscious in a much quicker way than poetry. Whereas poetry at least takes some level of like conscious contemplation before it can access the unconscious. Music is kind of this violent rapist that just goes into like when a fire alarm is going off or people are blasting their music outside of your street. You're not just going to, you could just stop your ears every time that happens, but living anywhere in a modern world, in the city or whatever, you're not going to do that all the time.
I think in a macrocosmic view, that's absolutely correct, but you can even take it further to micro and talk about specific genres and specific, because I've played music for a while and there's the pop music plays the same setting, same group of chords. It's just the same. It's the same thing. No matter if it's rock, country, rap, it's the same thing over and over again. It's kind of like my buddy was talking about Disney cartoons. How back in the day there was things like Sword in the Stone or Sleeping Beauty or Robin Hood, but in the last 30 years, it's telling the exact same story over and over again, and it's how I see it with music. And I don't know. We talked about this the first time I met you. I wonder, because I can tell hip hop, for example, but I was a kid. It was like Tupac and Biggie, and there was a lot of passion, anger, emotion. It wasn't very pretty. It was very just harsh and
it was raw.
Yeah. Now it seems hip hop, because I listen at work, I listen to these kids' music. It's just pretty. It's just like nice little melodies, and there's nobody talking about, fuck you, die too. There's none of that in there, and it's not that that's necessarily good, but it's closer to this primordial chaos than this subjective fluttery kind of tones. And I don't know the answer, but I agree with Plato completely. I think music is a big path, and I'm very careful what I listen to. I used to love Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses. I still, there's a part of me that really does, but I try to stick to, Vivaldi or even Wagner or Bach. Even though it's Protestant, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's why I go a bit farther back and go Hildegard von Bingen.
She's great. She's absolutely no. I was listening to her this morning.
She's what I listen to the most, probably.
Listen to her this morning.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's otherworldly.
100% agreed. 100% agreed. But yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that.
Anyway, going on out after music, we were going into astral. Is that where you wanted to go, or did you want?
Well, I'll stick with the semen thing just for a few more minutes. So when you read a alchemical book, you'll see there's always a designation, like a duality. There's like either corrosive or vulgar mercury. There's philosophical mercury. There's corrosive or vulgar gold. There's philosophical gold. So the mercurial waters is what is going to be in every alchemical text as well as myths. And it's the waters of the King Arthur myth with Alexander. She gives the sword, Lady in the Lake gives the sword out of the lake. And then in Mithraism, it's him making his way out of the water and standing on the stream, or it's Moses, being being born of the river.
Birth of Venus.
Yeah, this is all primordial waters. And so to understand what the waters are, you have to think of a seed, right? Take any seed. Let's just think of a corn seed, and you put it on pavement. You make sure it gets plenty of sunlight and it gets plenty of water, right? Nothing happens, right? Now the seed is dead. It's nothing. There's nothing in a seed, and that proves that nothing happens. So in order to germinate the seed, it has to be put in the earth.
Yeah.
Which is this, I have a tattoo on my arm, this old alchemical saying, in stere quinus invenitur, which is basically, it means in your shit, you'll find what you're looking for. But that's what the earth is. It's shit. Now, you put the seed in the earth, it's already a carcass as it is. And then what does it need? It needs rain, it needs water. So what water represents our desires in myth. It's all the desires that take different shape, because water can have any shape. So it takes all these different shapes, and it breaks the seed apart and makes the shell decay further and decay, right? But the sun, the fire, comes from above. Yeah. And so the decayed seed splits open, and the germ inside of it, which would be the soul, lifts up through the shit, through the waters, through the desires to reach the sun, right? And then the seed germinates up to the heavens and flowers and becomes something that was in the potential of this dead carcass, the thing that could not do anything without the filth. This is kind of Catharism. This is kind of the idea that, or the story of the prodigal son.
Or Jesus saying, lest a grain of wheat fall to the ground and dieth, it bear forth much fruit.
Exactly, yeah. Or even in Revelations of 3:16, the be not hot or be hot or cold, not be lukewarm.
Yeah.
It's this degradation, allowing the filth to invade your life in order for your life to become so shitty that it internally decays and dies. And then through the sun, you lift your life up in the Nordic tradition. There's the shape of a Y. It's a man resurrected.
Yeah, I love that sign.
Yeah, and it's kind of what a flower does. And you think about Saturn. That's another thing I was too hard on was astrology. Astrology is a major part of this. But Saturn, with is it Scythe?
Scythe.
Yeah, Scythe. So Saturn is a fascinating planet because in exoteric astrology, he's terrifying, right? He's the guy that brings all the horror.
Yeah.
He's the limiter. But that's one of the things that when I started really understanding astrology, like it's the best planet. It's the greatest planet. It's the planet. What it's doing is he's separating the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
He's going out in that field and letting that flower stand alone. He's knocking off all the bullshit, and he only knows one way. He's like a good father. He only knows one way, and that's discipline.
Yeah.
And he will break you down and make you feel so much pain, but it's in order to make you into a sharper person. He's trying to chisel the stone.
Yeah. He spareth not the rod.
No, he does not. And that's his idea about the stone. So here's a quote from the book called The Hermetic Triumph. The stone is the field of the wise, is the field that the wise cultivate, in which nature and the art have planted the seed that must produce fruit, right? So there's a stone all over the ancient Occident at crossroads called the Herme. Yeah. It's a great monolithic rectangular stone. And the only thing chiseled on it is a perfectly chiseled head, like almost like a David chiseled head, like perfectly chiseled head. But there's a big block body and a big erect phallus in the front. Well, the stone is the philosopher's stone, and that's your body. And that's what Saturn is trying to chisel down. That's what, when you're in the corrosive waters, is what those break apart. And so to reveal the true man inside, or the new man inside. And I think that's a big part of all these myths, and especially like in the alchemical works, to keep talking about the stone, the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone is you, right? Where there's a vulgar representation of that, and it's been able to break apart all the bullshit inside of you and everything else. And I was talking last week about how that one problem. Once you see there's an issue and you try to fix that issue in your life, it shows, there's more vices that come out of that. And so I got off heroin. I was on Suboxone for 13 years. Now I was on a tiny dose of Suboxone. Literally minuscule. My doctor was like, you should probably stay on this the rest of your life. Why not? Because it's going to be hell coming off of it. It has no effect on your life. Wife said the same. Everyone said the same thing. Like, why would you even get off this, man? Like, it's protecting you in a sense, psychologically from maybe desiring opiates. And it's nothing. It's relatively cheap. But I had this experience on mushrooms on the beach one time in St. Augustine. And I was by myself. It's one of the greatest experiences of my life. And a lot of it's personal. But one of the things I'll never forget was it was the moon. There was no sights. There was nothing crazy. It was a full moon night, and I was on the beach, and this huge moon was looking at me, and I could hear a voice like somebody standing right beside me, and she said, "Nothing will change until you get off the chemicals." Mm-hmm. And that happened in 2016, and I never forgot that. So when I started in the semen retention, I was like, "I've got this figured out." Then it hit me like, "No, I've got another vice I've got to get off of."
Well, you need your desire too.
Yeah.
Suboxone's getting rid of your desire.
Exactly. So I just decided, I waited till a full moon, and I was like, I don't know why. It was just, I just decided to wait till a full moon, and I stopped taking it. And I'm on week 9 now. And it's getting easier. It's weird. It's, with heroin, you stop taking it and you have 3 days of hell, and then it's over. Then the sun comes through the clouds and you feel great. Suboxone, you don't go through the hell. Like, you're not at like a 10 on the pain scale. You stay at like a 6 or 7, but it goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's almost like the Levy quote I was telling you about earlier. Like, you can't injure nature, without paying the price. But yeah, so this is all part of the idea of chiseling away at the stone, making that Hermai a beautiful sculpture, and that's where I'm at in my life, is I'm starting to chisel these things away. I don't eat what I like to eat anymore. I eat vegetables. Occasionally I'll eat some poultry or some fish. And I've tried to cut off everything that I enjoy, so I can desire things. I remember I was at my mom's house a couple months ago, and they had fried chicken, KFC.
Oh, good. Oh.
And my mouth was salivating. Like, I just want a piece. I'll take the skin. And I got to a point where I put a piece of skin in my mouth. I started chewing. I spit it out. Like, I can't do this. And that's you got control that desire. Yeah. I think it was Raymond Lully, who was an alchemist in the 1200s, who almost starved himself to death. He stayed in the state of starvation his entire life. Yeah, because he was that was his big sin. It was gluttony, and he did not want to fall into the sin of gluttony. Yeah. So, in a sense, it didn't sound very fun to people. Like, you have to get rid of your desires, but your desires are what's tying you to this earth. It's the illusions, of the soul, the senses.
It's kind of funny putting the KFC in your mouth and then spitting it out. That's kind of the gluttony analogy with semen retention.
Yeah, that's true. I haven't thought about that. I hadn't thought about that at all. I hadn't thought about that. Like, you kind of taste it and then you go, no. I'm
not going to swallow.
I'll tell you a quick story. This is an old myth. I'll tell it quick. St. George and the Dragon. Now, St. George is a patron saint of England, which I've yet to understand how that's possible. But the story takes place in Turkey. It doesn't involve England whatsoever. Yeah. So there's this little village in Turkey, and it's right around the time of Crusades. And there's a king, and he's kind of a lackadaisical king. His wife's dead. He has a beautiful virgin daughter. He's got a couple thousand people he takes care of in this village. One day, the lake outside the village, and it starts bubbling, and this great dragon rises up, and it comes down into the king's courtyard and demands food. And so the king gives us some sheep, and the king's basically like, okay, look, I'll bring you a sheep every week, or 2 sheep. I'll bring you 2 sheep every week, just to kind of get this problem to go away. And the dragon agrees. And then the king decides one day, you know what? We're losing way too much sheep. Let's just give it 1 sheep. So the dragon comes back. He's pissed. He eats some of the guards, and he says, King, you betrayed me. But that's okay, because what I really want is humans. I want virgins. I want you to bring me down a new virgin every week. Well, the king didn't know what to do. So they create like kind of like a lottery in the village, like all the children. They pull out a new child.
It's the Hunger Games.
Yeah. And they walk the child down to the the lake and they tie it up on this tree, let the dragon devour it. This goes on for a few months until one day the king's daughter comes up. It's her turn. The king tries to get out of it, and the whole community watches a name come up for the princess. And the king tries to play these little games. The community gets really mad. They try to revolt. The king realizes he has to do this. He has to take his daughter down there. It's this really sad scene where he walks his daughter down to the lake, and he ties her to a tree, and he just like cries and she's actually the strong one. He's the one crying and babbling like a baby, and they have to pull him away from her. And so then the dragon, he's still sleeping. Well, all about this time, there's a crusader who's coming by, and he sees this beautiful maiden in all white tied to this tree. And he comes up to her and says, "What is going on?" And she explains the situation. She's like, "You need to get out of here. Like, because the dragon has to eat me to save the village. And, you're just going to cause problems for us. You need to get out of here." He was like, "No, I can stop this dragon. This is nothing." She's like, "No, like, you just do not come here." So he hides back in the tree lines with his lance out. And the dragon comes out and he's like, "Oh, this is what I've been waiting for, the princess. This is what I've always wanted." And he's just like toying with her. And the knight waits till name's George, waits till the dragon gets right at the right point, and he charges out and he spears the dragon right in the fire maker.
Yeah.
All right. What he does now is the best part of the story. Doesn't kill the dragon.
Yeah.
He takes the ropes off the maiden. They get on the back of the dragon. They tame the dragon. They fly the dragon into the kingdom, land it right there in the center of the courtyard. The king and the villagers, according to the villagers, the king is dead at this point. They don't care about the king. This is a new king, right?
He rode the tiger.
He rode the tiger, right? So, and that's the story of St. George and the Dragon, and how this knight became a king and married the virgin and all this stuff. And that all these myths tie into this. I mean, I remember when I read that one, I'm like, holy crap. And that's exactly what they're trying to say, is to defeat the beast. And the ego would be the king. It's kind of sloppy, doesn't really know what's going on, like crying, being a baby about things, And then the soul, which would be the princess, is a strong one, and she knows it's time. We've done so much sinful things that we deserve to be devoured, kind of thing.
Right.
And then everyone ego presumes she's dead. Everyone presumes she's dead. She presumes she's dead, and the spirit comes in and doesn't slay the dragon, but tames the dragon.
Tames the beast.
Like
the beast in the 8th tarot card. It's a princess with the lion, and she's taming the lion. Because a lot of people want to repress. They don't want to tame the beast in. Because the hardest part is acknowledging the sin, acknowledging the darkness, and then actually taking it and using it. Plato talks about that in Phaedrus as well. That you have the dark horse and the white horse. And a lot of people, they just want to get rid of the dark horse altogether, like total asceticism. But that's just repressing. It's not actually dealing with the darkness.
I haven't read Phaedrus in years. Look, there's one more story about semen retention that I think we should add to this, because it's good. I looked for the source for this for about an hour yesterday, and I couldn't find it. But it comes from a YouTube video right in the middle of Jeff Epstein when he was still alive, and everyone was, it was like a big conspiracy. Everybody was talking about it. I'll never forget hearing this, because at the time I wasn't practicing, but I was kind of, this idea was starting to formulate in my mind. I stopped masturbating maybe a year before this. Like I heard the story and it stuck with me. It was from an FBI deposition from one of his masseuses, that Epstein would, he'd have a normal massage and would become sexual, and she would either perform fellatio on him or she would give him a hand job. But right before he would come, he would stop her, make a business call, an important business call, tell her to go out of the room, get off the phone, come back in, same process. He'd get real worked up right before he comes, stop, go out of the room, make a business call. And she made this comment like, "I actually never saw him ejaculate." So I think this, it's not just for us lowly, orthodox or kind of pagan kind of guys reading all these books.
The elite do it.
Yeah, I think they are the top are doing it as well. I'm almost sure of that. In which I think it's why they push things like Pornhub and OnlyFans and all these things on the minions to keep them ejaculating, keeping them weak.
Have you heard of Libido Domini by E. Michael Jones?
I was actually just looking at that book above your head. I've never heard of it.
Do you know E. Michael Jones?
No.
In my opinion, he's one of the most interesting living Catholic intellectuals. Well, for one, he takes psychoanalysis very seriously, which a lot of Catholic intellectuals or Christian intellectuals, they just want to not acknowledge the darkness.
Yeah.
They just want to push it off in metaphors like, oh, we're all sinful. Now I can like pretend to be a goody two shoes.
Yeah.
E. Michael Jones is very good at actually dealing with that. I always wanted him and Zizek to like be in a room together. But anyway,
Oh, that'd be good.
he wrote his big thing is talking about how the liberation of libido is the enslavement of the soul. So he goes back to St. Augustine, and St. Augustine says that for every passion, for every desire that is untamed that a man has, he has a master. And then he goes to de Sade, the French marquis, who says, basically he turns that on, what kind of like what Marx does to Hegel, de Sade does to Augustine. He says, for every orifice that man can take in desire, he is liberated. So the goal of a culture, in a way this is very French, the goal of a culture should be finding new orifices to open oneself up to pleasure, creating new ways to have pleasure. And therefore man is all the more free. So he's saying the exact opposite of Augustine. And his point, E. Michael Jones's point, is that it's not really Marx or all these other boogeymen that the right tends to criticize as being sort of the founders of modernity, or Descartes or whoever. Though Descartes definitely plays a role for Jones.
Oh, for sure.
But it's really de Sade, because his point is that the whole thing with pornography or sexual liberation in the 60s, how that was orchestrated by the CIA and all this other stuff. He's like, it's like when you take the pill, I guess, that the sexual revolution was orchestrated by various powers that be. You have to ask yourself, why? Why would they do that? Like, what would be the point? Like, don't you want people to be more like controlled and subservient? And he says, no, what the elite began to realize is that when you liberate sexual desire, you actually make people all the more controllable. If you give people, it's kind of the same thing you see in Brave New World with Aldous Huxley. If you give people lack of restraint to the desire, they really won't question anything, and they'll just be incredibly subservient. Instead of bread and circuses, it's bread and prostitution houses that you want.
That's Evelyn's thing too. That
and just quickly, one thing Jones loves to talk about. He says one of the greatest war strategies of all time that would put Sun Tzu and Machiavelli to shame is Israel. Because one thing that he admires that Israel did is that when they invaded Palestine, I mean, he says it's evil, but he says it's ingeniously evil. He says when Israel invaded Palestine, one of their attacks, they didn't like launch rockets or do any of this. They took over the television stations and aired pornography. So all these Palestinian families who had never seen a naked woman were these kids were suddenly bombasted with porn. And he said that in and of itself basically won the war for the Jews.
That's reminds me of two things. One thing is Heidegger's quote when he first saw a television set. He's like, oh, that's how they're going to control the masses. Yeah.
Well, do you know Saint Paisi of Mount Athos?
No.
He's a recent Orthodox saint, and he had a prophecy. This was before televisions, but he had a prophecy that in the future, when the Antichrist will come, instead of having icon corners, people will have one icon, but it'll be an icon of the devil that will change. And people will be glued to this, just watching it longer than they'll pray to an icon. And it's hard to read that and not think of a television.
Oh, of course.
And he said it'll be in the middle of everybody's room. Everyone will have one. And that they'll use this to put you into a state of pseudo sleep. You're not actually asleep. Exactly like Freud's, unconscious. Like you're on the couch, you're in a pseudo state of awareness, but also in a pseudo state of sleep. And basically anything that is said, you just kind of believe without question. Your reason is killed and everything goes straight into the unconscious.
That's good.
So it's a hypnotizing thing.
That's Gurdjieff 101. That's good. That's really good. Well, the other thing it reminds me of is Evola when he says that all our new rights are just further ways to imprison us. That's all it is. Yeah. It's basically you want to be free, so but you're becoming a slave. Like it's all you're doing.
It's the inverse of Rousseau. Rousseau says everywhere man is born free and yet he's in chains. It's actually quite the opposite. It's actually all these rights that you've granted us, Rousseau, have actually been what we're born and chained to now.
That's 100%. Well, it's funny, and you brought up Augustine, who I love, man. I remember reading Confessions years ago, and I loved. But then later, when I read The Golden Ass by Asclepius, because Augustine seems obsessed with this poem.
Yeah.
he seems to try to understand how occultism could change a man into an ass. After read the story, I'm like, what? Wait a minute. Like you could not have in all mythology a more perfect allegory. I mean, it's like they're telling the story as if it's true, right? But like how he tells it is like, oh my God, like this guy is having sex with this slave, and the house mother, the woman the wife who owns the house is practicing occultism. So him and the slave are doing these sexual incantations, kind of mimicking the wife, and he becomes a donkey. And it's a story of a man living in sin as a donkey. And then he gets saved by the goddess Isis. And I'm so confused as to why Augustine would think that this could possibly be real. Like you read all those other myths, it's no different than like Perseus. It's like, how are you getting this confused with an allegory? I don't know. But that's neither here nor there. It's just my little critique on Augustine,
Yeah, there's many things I like about him, and there's many things I was like, you really not only made a mistake here, but it's a mistake that forever made the West a much worse place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really hit or miss.
Well, I think a lot of the good ones are, though.
Yeah.
Evola's the person.
That's true.
They've all got their little, they see things through their own lens subjectively, But so what are they doing really quick with all this energy they're building up? And by the way, this is what the Chinese call qi. This is what now prana is a much bigger definition, but it would fall under the Hindu definition of prana, the German vril.
Mm-hmm.
Vril is more, it's the same thing, but their goals are typically, for whatever reason, it always seems to me like there's spirituality involved, but it's more materialistic. I don't know why that is. Like when you read some of the old books about vril, they're more interested in earthly power and wealth than the other ones are, because the Hindu and the Taoist could care less about any of those things.
Well, the vril is tied specifically to Agartha, right?
Yes.
So that might play a role there.
Yeah. Well, it's tied to the Green Dragon, supposedly, and then getting to Hitler and all that. But so this is all kind of, my point with this is this has been practiced everywhere. I mean, this is not, and I was telling you earlier, like Kabbalah is 100% a sexual practice. And when you get into it, which we don't have time to get into today because it's a wormhole that it never ends. But I was telling you, I think 8 or 9 of the Hebrew letters of the 22 have direct sexual meaning, and so what these guys are doing is they're getting into what we're talking about with Bruno, into the astral realm. Now, there's a quote from Plotinus that I think, because the other guy, what's the gentleman who was right beside me last time? What's his name? Jacob. Yeah. Jacob Burma. Yeah. He was saying, he asked me if I'd been in the astral realm, and I actually have, but I'm not ready to go back. And this is a quote from Plotinus. Some lack arms. He means like weapons. But he who has arms should fight. No God is going to fight for the unarmed. The law decrees that victory to war goes to the brave, not to those who pray. The cowards should be those that are ruled by the wicked. That is what's just. So Plotinus talks a lot about the ever awakened. He talks about this a lot. So does Evola, the ever awakened. The Buddhists talk about it, the ever awakened. What their meaning is a person that's awake, and when they go to sleep, they're awake. Mm-hmm. That's what they're inferring there. And so with that quote, what I was trying to say is, so one time, there's 2 ways into the astral realm. There's the way of sleep, which I've never found a good way. It seems to be hit or miss. There's methods you can do it, but they don't always work 100%. Yep. Then there's a method where you're awake. And there's an author, a novelist called Gustav Meyrink, who writes about this in many of his books. The Golem, The Green Face, The White Dominican. And probably his best one is The Angel in the West Window, which is also about sexual magic. But the thing with Meyrink, and it's funny because Guénon doesn't like Meyrink. And I've noticed this about Guénon. Guénon will not criticize someone unless they're mostly right. He won't take the time out of his day to criticize. So like he hates Fulcanelli, right? And when you read his problem with Fulcanelli, I agree with him on all these points, but there's this one thing he's so wrong about. But that just makes Fulcanelli like more legit because Guénon's the man. Evola would consider him the man, and he knows all about occultism. So if Guénon takes the time to criticize you, you're doing something right.
Yep. So
Guénon doesn't like Meyrink. He thinks he's too sloppy because Meyrink straight tells you in his novels how his characters get to the astral realm, literally step by step. especially in the green vase. I mean, you couldn't have a more direct, towards the end, way to get in there. But what all these people say, whether it's even Blavatsky or Guénon or Evola or, all these guys, they all say the same thing. Like, you don't know danger until you've been to the astral realm.
Yep.
So I tried the method that Mayrink prescribes at the end of the green face in my car in the parking garage under my job. And it requires perfect solitude, no noise or anything. And it was the perfect time because it's like at 3 o'clock, 2:30 when no one's in there anyway, everyone's at work. So I did his methods and I opened my eyes and I was in a world that was similar to this world, but not really this world. And I was walking through the garage and I heard something coming, and it was, the best way I can describe it is a chariot led by someone that looks like maybe Alexander the Great. And at first I thought it was 2 steeds coming at me, but as it got closer, I realized I don't know what it was, but it was not steeds. It was some kind, I don't know. It was horrific looking. And so I used Mayrink's methods, which I'd rather not describe because I don't know if it's appropriate, to get out. And I got out and I was like, you know what? I'm going to wait for that. I'm going to go back until I'm ready to, because what they say is there's a bunch of disembodied souls in the realm, and they're all looking for a body.
Well, yeah, people who astral projected and didn't get back in their body in time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, they say that it's safer to do when you're asleep than when you're awake,
Yes.
but you can get a lot more done if you do it when you're awake. So to understand the realm, I'm going to use a Kabbalistic interpretation of the astral, or just the world in general. So you have a 4-story building. It's a furniture store. And this is from Milo Duquette, who has a great book called Chicken Kabbalah. It's the most rudimentary, basic book on Kabbalah, but it was like maybe the 15th book I'd read on the Kabbalah. But after I read that, the other ones started to make sense. So he has this building. It's a 4-story building. The bottom is all furniture and the things you could sell, odds and ends of different types of furniture. There's some mahogany tables, some cherry tables, there's some leather couches, some cloth couches, all this stuff. And that's our material world. Second story is all of these like the construction guys. He would say that the lowest caste of angels, and they're putting all this stuff together, and they're blending it together. They're making things. They're taking the instructions from on high, and they're making all these different pieces of furniture. Right. The level above that are the engineers drawing the blueprints. These are the high angels. These are the Michaels and the Gabriels, and they're doing everything that the master on the top floor is telling them to do.
Yeah, this is just like Plato's line in Republic.
What's that?
That you have one line, and then above that one line and 2 smaller lines above and below. The middle line is between the real and the imaginary. In the imaginary, you have the visual world, what we see and interact with, the shadows in the cave.
Yeah.
Above that, you have what produces the. So basically, you have the imaginary, then you have like the things as they are.
Yeah.
Then above that, you have mathematics.
Yeah.
Which would be like the engineers.
Yeah.
And then above that, you have the sun.
So in Kabbalah, above, like the top floor, he tells the story is as you go up the stairs from the 3rd floor and you open the door to the top floor and it's empty. Because it's the one. It's the Buddhist nothing. It's the room. It's intuiting to these.
Yeah, it's not Morgan Freeman. It's nothing.
No, it's nothing. Yeah. So the astral realm is making it to the 2nd floor and getting involved with the construction of this world. That's the causal realm. And in Kabbalah, when you pray basically, so you pray to like Michael on the 3rd floor to let, I don't know, let's just call him Jake on the 2nd floor, help you out with something, because Jake can't hear you because he's too small. So you have to tell Michael to tell Jake to do something. It's like a hierarchy.
Yeah.
You have to reach high to tell someone low to help you with something else.
Yeah, you have to go into HR.
Exactly. Yeah.
Get stuff done.
Here's a great joke about HR. If you ever meet HR guys, say, you know what the first and last letters of the name Hitler are? And then you just walk away. But so the astral realm is you get into the causal realm. And so what Bruno was doing is he was taking Plato's memory palace method and then building it up into the astral realm and creating things that will then come into earth, come into material. And it would, but a lot of that was basically messing with the psyches of the masses in the astral realm and manipulating things like that. And there's an author named Samuel Uriah who's like a modern Gnostic. He died in the 50s, wrote probably 75 books. I mean, Amazon is crazy. You just keep going and going and going. But he was big on that. he says that you don't trust any spirit in the astral realm that comes to you, none of them, unless it's obvious they can be trusted. So he tells a story the first time he comes that everything tries to mislead you. Everything.
Yeah, I would say even obviously getting your trust, I think that just means it's a more intelligent spirit.
He tells a story about that happening to him, but he said that the one thing, finally, after he's been doing this for a couple of years, and he just kind of walking around seeing things and having all these different types of levels, castes of spirits come at him, and everyone lies, everyone told a lie.
Yep.
And his whole thing is with semen retention and with the wife, and his whole thing was they would lie to about sex. But maybe that was because that was one of his methods of spirituality. But that's what they always came at him with. But he said that he finally met a spirit that he thought was Christ, that he felt in his heart of hearts that this man can be trusted. And he tells a story of things they do, and this guy shows them places to go. And there's in his experience, there are houses in the astral realm, like almost like congregations of the black path and the white path. Mm-hmm. And in every city in the astral realm where you find a congregation of whites, you'll find one of blacks. And
it's the White Lodge and Black Lodge.
It's exactly what it is. He uses those words, White Lodge. That's exactly what he says. But he said that this Christ figure, after years of walking with him, turned out just to be his spirit.
Yeah.
It was his spirit that was leading him through the astral realm. And these guys warn so much. Even Evla, who doesn't seem to be scared of anything, is a little nervous about the astral realm. So that's why I haven't got into it, because I don't think I've got enough arms. Like Plotinus said, the guys aren't going to help me. And what they're trying to do is, so Plotinus has another quote in his book of the Gnostics where he says, "Are the gods really to come to me and me not go to them?" And that's kind of what they're doing in the astral realm. They're meeting the gods halfway. And Eliphas Levi, who I cannot recommend this book on transcendental magic enough. It's fantastic. But he says that, that the whole thing with getting to the astral realm is, you have to be someone important. You don't just want to be some Joe Schmo. I don't know if his point would be maybe that only bad things are going to happen to you. You're not going to do anything good in the astral realm. You have to be a man of target, a man of spiritual means. And then that's when you're getting attacked, you're a man of spiritual means.
Yeah.
And he talks about that you have to charge your inner magnetism, almost like mesmer, which would be sexual and breathing, things like breathing techniques to get the magnetism going. Because I've seen videos of a healer who can wave his hand over a blindfolded woman's body. I watched this scientific experiment. They were trying to disprove him. I think it was in Russia. And this guy walks up over this blindfolded woman and makes her body convulse in different places through his magnetism. And I'm sure that's all through breathing and semen retention. But
Mesmer got his stuff from a Catholic monk who was raised in the Brahmin class. He was Indian.
Do you think Mesmer was doing semen retention, or was he doing?
Oh, almost definitely.
That's what I think too.
Yeah, we talked about Mesmer in the Freud class. We had a whole unit on him. He's definitely, he was getting his stuff out of like a Hindu case, a Hindu Brahmin. So he was
that would make a lot of sense.
Huh? Yeah.
Mesmer fascinates me.
I mean, he was a weird guy. I mean, do you know like what his sessions were like? He would meet with, I mean, you could see why he had to run away to France to do what he wanted to do. He would sit down with the patient with them parallel, put his knees against theirs, and then put his hands on their chest for like hours. And then when he was done, he played this obscure glass instrument. He just played like a sonnet or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he was like, all right, you're good to go. And Freud read this and he was like, whoa.
Well, and he obviously had a lot of success too, Mesmer did. I mean, he obviously was doing big things because, I mean.
Well, he was doing all this like very sexual stuff with very young, attractive women, but not explicitly engaging in anything sexual with them.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. You know also he's best friends with Mozart?
I did not know that.
It's crazy. It's like.
That's weird. I read quite a bit about it and that never came across.
I think that's in the.
That's like esoteric mesmerism.
I think that's in that very.
Well, that would kind of make sense because he ran in the Mason circles.
Yeah.
And so did Mozart. So that would kind of make sense.
Magic flute.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's in the book, Discovery of the Unconscious. The big book Peterson always talks about. It's in the opening chapter. They talk about Mesmer and is it Charcot?
Yep. Charcot, it came out of Mesmer, yep.
Yeah, and then the whole thing there. So, but back to this Hermai. I forgot about this point, about the stone. You ever seen a picture of the god Serapis?
Is it the snake?
snake with a head that looks just like Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Okay.
It's from about maybe a couple centuries before Christ, maybe a few after. We don't know. It came out of Egypt. So,
yeah, people thought it was like a joke, right?
Yeah.
Like he was flying spaghetti monster, but ancient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you'll see all over alchemical text a snake with a lion head. That is
the demiurge.
Yes.
Yaz-Kabbaleth. Yeah, Yaz-Kabbaleth.
So in the Kabbalah, the letter Teth, which looks like a goose, kind of like a very rudimentary goose, means serpent with a lion head, and the further interpretation means semen.
Yes, which is also from what I understand, the letter used for the snake in the garden.
Yes. Well, so there's a lot of Gnostic sects say that the fruit in the garden is just the orgasm, and it's the intertwining of these two people that gets, instead of the snake, it's the same snake that Christ says be wise with serpents, the same snake that Moses uses. It's always the same snake, but it's just got the better of these godlike beings, you know. And if you think about sex, though, that's the only way we are like a god.
Yes. Well, animals have sexual relations too, but they don't. What's the difference
between animals and us
in regards to the sexual realm? Because insofar, I'm not disagreeing, right, that sex is the way that we have, and this is very Platonic, eros, sexual eros is the way we access godhood.
Yeah.
But there's something, yet animals have sex. So what's the difference between the human sexual realm and the animal sexual realm?
So in animal sexual realm, they get in heat, have sex. It's all the primordial chaotic waters. It's all this ancient kind of instinctual.
Pure instinct.
Pure instinct. It's pure bestiality.
Okay.
That's what it is. So with humans, it's much more complicated and nuanced. Even if you're going around like sleeping with everybody and not retaining your seed, just ejaculating everywhere, like it's much more nuanced because there's an element of love, of eros, of desire that comes into play. And not that there's not desire with animals, but it's all instinctual and it goes away as soon as that mating season's over. With humans, it's like every month there's a mating season when the woman ovulates, you know? And so the eros, and because of that also grants us much more. It's not instinctual in the sense it is. There's a part of it that's instinctual. There's a part of it that's higher, which is the love element. If you want to look exoterically, you know, that's where it becomes higher. And then you can take that and further develop it through sexual magic practices, things like that. But we're the only animal that can do that. And it's like that old line that humans are the only animal that can look up and look at the sun.
Yeah,
you know, it's these little. It's what makes us special, I guess. It makes us different than animals.
How much time do we have left, Calvin?
You got 3 minutes.
Okay.
What?
It goes by fast.
I got one last thing I have to get out. This is really important. I told you this earlier, this quote from Younger. Show me how you suffer, I'll show you what kind of man you are.
Yep.
And I think that's so important that people need to realize that the way to a higher level of spirituality is never through pleasure, ever through pleasure. It's always through suffering and Saturn.
Even the ones that seem to be pleasure or masking suffering.
Oh, 100% would agree with that.
So that's the left hand. It is where you're going by pleasure superficially, but pleasure itself is a way to access suffering.
That's really good. Well, I hope I've clarified some things and hope this has been a good podcast.
I think it has. Yeah, I think we
Closing remarks.
Closing remarks. Just remember that if it feels good and you continue to do it, no matter if it's anything from one thing I struggle with now is drinking a Diet Coke. I love drinking. I love a Diet Coke in the morning.
It's like what Trump said, the great sage. No, I've never seen a skinny person drinking Diet Coke.
Except this guy. And I'll tell you why is because I've noticed that sugar drinks give you bad breath.
Really?
Yeah, something I've noticed. And I like a soda, I like that little soft, hard kind of thing going on. So I drink a Diet Coke in the mornings. But if a thing gives you pleasure and you want to keep doing it, it's your master.
Yeah.
And so whether it's sex, whether it's drugs, whether it's food, whether it's power, whether it's popularity, whether it's how you're seen. I love the saying from the second season of The Young Pope, you know, reputations for the petite bourgeoisie. If it's your reputation you're worried about, it's your God.
Yep.
And all the people you're worried about are your gods. So that would be my last thought.
Yep. Just let us know in the comments anything else you want us to talk about. Other than that, we'll sign off here and see you next time. 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 Next time, 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 time,